5 people from the Eagles organization that was going to show up. Carson Wentz and a few other people. They had a logistical nightmare as far as trying to get people approved from security and Secret Service. There's a lot of things that go into if you get invited to the White House. You have to then there's other stuff that you have to do. You're not just going to be able to walk into the White House. So instead of causing all this backup stuff, the president said, hey, you don't want to come to the White House? Don't come to the White House. It is what it is, but they made a big issue about it. And so what this has become is a very, very bad PR thing on their side. NBA doesn't deal with it. Racing doesn't deal with it. Other countries don't deal with it. It's the NFL, and it's the NFL players trying to get attention. And I'm sorry, but I think that's what it is. I think what has happened here is the NFL players have begun to polarize their fan base and the country, and instead of being a part of the solution, they're a part of continuing the problem. What are your thoughts? Matt?
Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's
go
okay. I think what I will say is the NFL, I will agree with you that the NFL had to probably do something. The NBA's had a rule in place for, I think, nearly 20 years. I don't remember that it was a player for the Kings that started kind of all this, and then they kind of quietly passed a rule that you must stand for any national anthem that's played. And keep in mind, in Toronto and back then in Vancouver, they used to play the Canadian national anthem as well. Yeah, I think they need to do something. It was wise to do it in the quiet of the off season. If there is a biggest lull in the NFL off season, it's right after the draft and before mini camps and OTAs start. So they did it at a good time. Listen. I think there are various platforms as a player you can take, and I think you have to live with the consequences of those actions when you use a platform to draw attention to an issue. So perhaps the players didn't expect this to garner this much attention. I don't know. But regardless, it's a moot point now. And I think for me, being a pretty apolitical person or non-political person, I guess is a better way to say it, I'm thrilled that this is over with and we don't ever have to talk about it much again. Yes, when the season starts and the team doesn't come out, that'll be a big story. If a team does that, my guess is no team will. I think every team will come out with most of their teammates. I'm sure there'll be a few people in the locker room, but you won't notice unless they're big names who they are. So I'm glad it's over with, and I think the commissioner probably did the only thing he could at this point. But I don't know. I think athletes have a duty to be socially responsible and socially involved. They know their communities better than we do, obviously, unless we live in the same community they do. So I don't know. I guess I'm going to go on around that way here. I'm glad it's over with, but I hope athletes continue to use their platform to express themselves in any way they see fit, and they have to understand that perhaps a view they portray will not be agreed on universally.
Well, absolutely, and I fear that hopefully the NFL will stop this, but what I fear will happen is the NFL networks, not the NFL network, but networks broadcasting the NFL, pregame, they'll happen to have a cameraman in the locker room, and that'll be what we see during the national anthem. And I hope that does not come to play. Grant, go right ahead, sir. Any thoughts on that? You have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think whenever you're making a message like that, it's important to understand that just because you believe something is a good avenue to take to make your message, you have to also take into account how others will perceive it. And I feel like whenever there's anything involved with the flag or things of that nature, you already know that it's going to offend a lot of people, and then they're going to be tuned out of your message. And those are the type of people, typically speaking, that you're going to want to try to make your message to. So I don't really feel like that's the right method to take, because your message just becomes about something else, and that now we're talking about, as you were saying in the original point about President Trump and a lot of things like that, but the main protest wasn't really about the president or anything like that. We're now talking about side things that aren't even the point that they were trying to make originally. So I just think it's important for players to truly understand the ramifications and the actual effect of the method that they're going to take.
All right, guys, let's move on over to some NBA talk. Obviously, got to like the Indiana Pacers. I know you write for the Indiana Pacers. You work a lot with NBA analytics as well, Grant, so we'll kind of go to you first on this. But, Victor Oladipo, saw him out at the track, had a chance to talk with him. He's all about being back here at Indiana. He's all about being a leader with the Pacers. He feels like he's found a home here with the Indiana Pacers. First of all, the Indiana Pacers, wow, nobody saw that coming. I think everybody's happy with what they did. And I think, when we traded Paul George for Victor Oladipo and others, we thought, wow, well, don't know. But I think it became very, very clear that we came up on the winning side of that. So real quickly, give us your thoughts on the season of the Indiana Pacers, and then we'll talk a little bit about LeBron James, ladies and gentlemen. Of course we will. Go ahead, Grant.
I think it was a phenomenal season for the Pacers. Not many people, even the executives on the team, thought they were going to win nearly that many games. I remember Kevin Pritchard during one of the playoff games against the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was saying on the sideline during an interview that they thought, they might not even hit 30 wins, and that would be a good season when they were talking to owner Herb Simon. And it's just crazy because, to me, when I didn't really have a set expectation, because they had the most roster turnover in the entire NBA by a considerable margin. So it's really hard to have a legitimate expectation for that. So really, with wins and losses, that's not necessarily the way you can set your goal with a lot of unknown. I felt like the best method for them would be to view it as a win if they could make the playoffs, no matter the seed, and if one of their players could emerge as an NBA All-Star, because, it's an All-Star driven league. And if you can have an All-Star emerge, that helps your chances of recruiting free agents. And they really checked every single box. They took LeBron James and the Cavaliers to the brink of playoff elimination. That's something that's never happened to LeBron in the first round during his NBA playoff career. Victor Oladipo racked up a lot of accolades. He's probably going to win Most Improved Player of the Year. All-NBA third-team guard, arguably could have been higher, an all-defensive first team, and he was an all-star. I think, Miles Turner didn't take that next step, but they didn't really give him a whole lot of a playmaking increase, and his playing time went down. So that's kind of a side issue. But they at least have one all-star to, use for recruiting purposes, and they really just took care of business.
So, Matt, what are your thoughts? Pacers overall, Victor Oladipo. Your thoughts on the trade for Victor from Paul George? What are your thoughts?
Well, when the trade happened, I kind of was like, I wasn't overwhelmed with positivity by any means, but I thought, okay, well, they did something here where they got two starters for an all-star, and yes, when you trade an all-star, you always like to get an all-star back. Now, obviously, when they made the trade, they didn't know they were getting one. But turns out, not only did they get an all-star back, but they also got another guy in Sabonis that I think down the road will turn into a sixth man of the year candidate in the NBA or a starter. I mean, I think he's going to be that crucial in the Pacers' plans. And then you have the continued development of Miles Turner. It's so hard to forget he's so young because he essentially got heavy minutes as a rookie and has continued to improve. He's one of the best shot blockers in the league. Victor Oladipo, you talk about him, all third NBA team. Yeah, I agree with Grant. Probably should have been second team, but that's okay. And he was on all defense. he'll be the most improved player, and I maintain he should be the defensive player of the year. I kind of came to that conclusion around February when you see the steals just piling up, and then he ends up leading the league in steals. But then you also look at the per minute on defense that he does. He plays good defense. He's not just a steal machine. I mean, he does lock down guys, especially in the mid half of the fourth quarter. So I really think he should be the defensive player of the year. Going forward, it's a really interesting thing the Pacers have in front of them. They could easily take a big swing this offseason and try to bring in I mean, they could try to bring in a superstar with an expiring contract. I don't expect them to do that. But they could go after a Kyrie Irving, a Kawhi Leonard. I don't expect them to do that. But they have all this flexibility.
You read my mind, Matt. That's exactly what I was going to say to Grant and get ready to say, that Leonard wants out of San Antonio. Is he a good fit here? I don't know. But, Grant, wouldn't you say that is like the first domino to fall where everybody's going to be trying to gobble up to get LeBron James? So let's go on to LeBron James' watch. 1, does he stay in Cleveland? Highly unlikely. 2, is there a scenario where Paul George and LeBron James end up in L.A.? I say there is. I say that the Lakers dump Ball, get rid of Ball, bring on LeBron James. That also brings the opportunity, though, for LeBron James maybe to go to San Antonio. So, Grant, take us into LeBron Watch 2018.
Well, I think it's an interesting situation to look at because a lot of teams do not have salary cap flexibility, and that's especially the case for a lot of the teams that LeBron would typically be considering. Because if you look at, for example, like it might sound crazy, but the Miami Heat are a team that's on his list, and they're gridlocked. They really don't have the space to really do a sign and trade or to field a roster enough to be a legitimate title contender against the Golden State Warriors or whoever else would come out of the Western Conference. So when you really look at the other options, it's like stay in Cleveland, go to Philadelphia, and I don't really think that he fits Philadelphia very well. I think Ben Simmons is a liability off the ball, and you need the ball in his hands. And I really don't think that core is developed enough to truly be a force in the NBA Finals yet. And LeBron is a win now player, so I don't really view that as one of those top options for him. And the Boston Celtics are an interesting one to look at because that's an unlikely scenario as well, including the Warriors, because actually it's kind of crazy to even say that he might go to the Warriors, but like that's like one of those like dark horse candidates that's on his list too. But the Boston Celtics, they have so many assets. They could just slide him right in at that power forward spot, have a shooter at every single position with Al Horford at the 5, and that would be a legitimate force to contend for a championship. And then obviously I saved the Lakers for last, because that's the most likely scenario. And, I think that's probably what will end up happening because they have so much salary cap flexibility, and they can create even more by packaging a young asset or two with Luol Deng's contract to move him away. They would have like more than 2 max contract slots. And it gets interesting when you factor in Kawhi Leonard too, because, he's under contract for around almost the exact same amount as Luol Deng's contract, and they do have multiple young players that fit those positions that, Paul George, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard would be playing. So if you really want to field that type of a roster where you have superstar players, you could just package those players off and send them to San Antonio and make sure you land Kawhi Leonard to fit all those 3 guys under your salary cap and to have bird rights. Because if you sign LeBron James to a max contract and you sign Paul George this summer, it's going to be nearly impossible, if not impossible, to sign Kawhi Leonard when he becomes a free agent. So the key is to make as good as a trade offer now so you can get him and have his bird rights to be able to go over the salary cap to acquire him and, actually retain him beyond this upcoming season because, you want to make sure the order of operations is correct and you don't miss out on a talent like Kawhi Leonard, because, those three guys, that if there is a core that could beat the Warriors,